It's a Rothko reproduction. The champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. The man, host of this entire glittering catastrophe, Leo Vance, whose face had graced magazine covers and whose name opened doors in every corner of Manhattan, froze mid-motion, his practiced smile flickering like a bulb about to burn out. Lumi straightened from where she'd been crouched on the travertine floor, a fistful of half-melted pillar candles clutched in her hand. The penthouse had emptied an hour ago, leaving behind the carnage of a perfect party, abandoned champagne flutes, crumpled napkins, the dying scent of expensive perfume. Her friend Hannah had begged for help collecting the floral arrangements before the florist's morning pickup, and Lumi, being the kind of person who said yes when it cost her nothing, had agreed. She hadn't expected to find a forgery hanging above the fireplace. Leo lowered the glass. The mask he'd worn all evening, charming, effortless, slightly detached, had cracked. Underneath was something else. Something alert. "What did you say?" "The brushwork." Lumi gestured with the candles. "Too uniform." Rothko's late work had turbulence. The edges bled into each other like he was fighting the canvas. This was painted by someone playing it safe. Someone who already knew what they wanted before they started. She watched him process this. His jaw tightened. His gaze flicked to the painting, deep crimson bleeding into charcoal, all the right colors in all the right places, with something that looked almost like grief. $800,000, he said quietly. "I paid $800,000 for that painting." "I'm sorry." "No, you're not." "No," she agreed. "I'm not. But I am sorry you got cheated. That's a lot of money to spend on a lie." Leo set down the champagne. He crossed to the bar, poured himself a whiskey, and drained it in one swallow. When he turned back, he was looking at her differently. Not as a guest who'd lingered too long, but as something else. A question he hadn't known he needed to ask. "Who are you?" Lumi tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm the one taking your flowers to the curb. Hannah's friend. We've been over this." "No." He shook his head. "I mean, who are you, really? You walked into my home, identified a masterpiece of art forgery in 30 seconds, and didn't even blink. You're not a florist." "I never said I was." "You're something else." "I'm someone who notices things." She shrugged. "That's not a job. It's just how I'm built." Leo studied her. The party had been full of people who wanted things from him, investments, favors, the reflected glow of his status. But this woman in her simple black dress, holding a handful of dying candles, was looking at his home like she could see through every surface. She wasn't asking for anything. She was just seeing. "Come upstairs," he said. "I need to show you something." Lumi raised an eyebrow. "Is this the part where you show me your etchings?" "I don't have etchings. I have a fraud investigation that's about to implode my entire career." He met her gaze. "And I think you're the only person in this city who could help me see what I've been missing." She considered him. The desperation was real. So was the calculation underneath it. He was a man who had learned to read people, to find their weaknesses and use them. But right now, he wasn't trying to use her. He was asking. "That's not a pickup line," she said. "No. It's a cry for help." Lumi set down the candles. 5 minutes. "And if the door closes, I'm out." The study was what she expected, mahogany and glass, screens glowing with data, photographs of Leo with politicians and celebrities arranged like a museum exhibition of his own life. But what he led her to was a monitor displaying a spreadsheet so complex it looked like a city map seen from above. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks until due diligence closes on a merger that was supposed to double my firm's assets. But one of my partners has been feeding information to the competitor for the past 8 months. Lumi studied the screen. Her eyes moved across the numbers, finding the patterns. "The painting," she said. "You bought it from him." Leo's head snapped up. "How did you?" "The timeline. You bought it 5 years ago, which means you trusted this partner for longer than that. But if he sold you a forgery, he's been building leverage. One day he'll use it." She looked at him. "You didn't bring me here to talk about your merger. You brought me here because you're afraid he's already using it." The silence stretched between them. Leo's face had gone pale. "There's a missing piece," Lumi continued, turning back to the screen. "Your whole structure depends on an intermediary named Chin. But the expense reports show him meeting someone from the competitor's firm every Tuesday. 3 lunches a month, always private rooms. After you bought the painting, it became 6. You saw that in the expense reports?" "I saw a pattern." She moved to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and began sketching. The diagram took shape in clean lines, a restructuring that bypassed the compromised intermediary, separating the assets into a holding company that Chin couldn't touch. It took her 3 minutes to draw. Another 2 to explain. "Move the due diligence materials directly between the principals," she said, capping the marker. "Quietly. Within 48 hours. If you wait longer, he'll know someone's onto him." Leo stared at the whiteboard. His hands were shaking slightly, though his voice stayed steady. "Do you know what you just did? Saved you from a bad deal. Saved me from 20 years in federal prison." He looked at her with something that might have been awe. "Projected losses of $70 million. Criminal investigation. Fraud charges. I could have spent the next 2 decades, but you won't." Lumi set down the marker. "Because you asked for help. That's the part that matters." She walked to the door, then paused. From her bag, she pulled out a small card, blank except for a QR code in the corner. "This is a temporary anonymous chat. If you need more help, use it." Leo took the card, turning it over in his hands. "You trust no one." "I trust no one," she agreed. "It's kept me alive." "Then why are you helping me?" Lumi considered the question. There was no easy answer. The truth was something she didn't fully understand herself, something about the way he'd looked at her when she'd called out the forgery. Not angry. Not defensive. Just relieved. Like he'd been waiting for someone to finally see through the facade. "Because you needed it," she said. "And I don't think anyone's helped you with something real in a very long time." She left him standing in the study, staring at the whiteboard, the card clutched in his hand. The cab took her back to Brooklyn through streets slick with rain. Lumi watched the city scroll past the window, neon reflections on wet asphalt, late-night bodegas glowing like beacons, the million tiny lives that made up Manhattan's after-hours geography. She should have been tired. It was past 2 in the morning, she'd spent 4 hours collecting flowers that would be dead by sunrise, and she'd just restructured a multi-million-dollar merger for a man she barely knew. But adrenaline still hummed in her veins. At home, she filled a vase with the salvaged orchids, changed into her nightclothes, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark. She hadn't given him her number. She'd given him an anonymous contact that would expire in 30 days. She didn't know if he'd use it. She didn't know if she wanted him to. And yet, at 3:17 a.m., her phone vibrated. Lumi stared at the ceiling. Her hand didn't move toward the nightstand. It vibrated again. She told herself, I can look in the morning. But she didn't wait until morning. Still awake? The message was short. No name. But she knew who it was. Depends. On what? On whether the person on the other end is worth losing sleep over. A pause. Then, I'm the guy with the terrible painting. Does that count? Lumi smiled in the dark. That depends. Did you take my advice? The escrow structure. The holding company. I moved everything tonight. Chin doesn't know yet. He'll figure it out soon. I know. That's why I'm still awake. She read the message twice. There was something in it she recognized, not his desperation from earlier, but something quieter. A man who'd been alone in his crisis and was still adjusting to having company. What else are you thinking about? She wrote. A longer pause this time. She could almost see him weighing his words. The painting. I'm trying to figure out why I never saw it. I've looked at it every day for 5 years. I should have known. You weren't looking for a lie. You were looking for a relationship. That's a kind way of saying I was an idiot. It's a kind way of saying you trusted someone. That's not the same thing. Another long pause. How do you do that? He wrote. Do what? Know exactly what to say. Like you've already seen everything and you're just deciding whether to let the other person catch up. Lumi let the question hang. It was too sharp, too close to the bone. She'd spent years learning to deflect those kinds of questions, to keep the spotlight on the other person where it belonged. But it was 3:30 a.m., and she was tired, and something about the darkness made honesty feel less dangerous. Practice, she wrote. I've had a lot of practice. At seeing things? At pretending I don't. She set down the phone. The admission sat in the air between them, heavier than she'd expected. She waited for the flood of follow-up questions, the probing that always came when she let someone glimpse the edges of her. But Leo just wrote, I understand that. 3 words. No pity, no pressure. Just recognition. Lumi stared at the message for a long time before she closed her eyes and let herself sleep. The weeks that followed were marked by midnight messages. They didn't plan it. It just happened. Her phone would buzz in the quiet hours, and she'd answer, and somehow the conversation would stretch until the sky began to lighten. They didn't talk about the merger. They talked about other things. I've been thinking about this artist I saw last week, Leo wrote one night. Her paintings are all shadows. Just layers of darkness with barely any color. It shouldn't work, but it does. Why? I keep asking myself that. I think it's because the shadows feel real. Like she's not trying to hide anything. She's just showing you what's already there. That's rare, Lumi wrote. Most people spend their lives trying to cover the shadows. I know. I used to be one of them. She paused. Used to? I'm trying something different now. A beat. I told my wife everything. About the painting, the fraud, the night I met you. All of it. How did she take it? She said I looked like myself for the first time in years. Then she told me she wanted a divorce. Lumi waited. She didn't offer sympathy. She'd learned that the first thing people needed when they told you something painful was simply to be heard. I thought I'd feel worse, Leo continued. But I think we'd both been pretending for so long that the truth felt like relief. Does that make me a terrible person? No. It makes you someone who's stopped lying to himself. You keep saying that like it's easy. I don't think it's easy. She typed the words slowly, choosing them with care. I think it's the hardest thing anyone can do. But I also think it's the only thing that leads somewhere worth going. Another night, closer to the end of the third week, I've been thinking about what you said, Leo wrote. About seeing things. You said it's how you're built. But you also said you practice pretending you don't. I did say that. Why? Lumi read the question. She could have deflected. She could have made a joke about how everyone needed a hobby. But something in the way he'd asked, no agenda, no demand, made her want to answer. Because when you see things clearly, you have to carry what you see. And not everyone wants to be seen. She paused. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people keep their illusions. But you saw me. And you didn't look away. No. I didn't. Why? The question had been there since the first night, hovering at the edges of every conversation. She'd been avoiding it, deflecting it, telling herself she didn't have an answer. But she did. Because you looked like you'd been waiting for someone to see you. And I know what that feels like. She sent the message and put down the phone. The weight of the confession pressed against her chest. She'd never said that to anyone before, not to friends, not to her therapist, not to the few people who'd made it past her carefully constructed defenses. The vibration came a minute later. I think that's the first time you've told me something true. It's not the first time. It's just the first time you noticed. Fair. A beat. I'm still learning. Learning what? How to see you. Lumi read the words. Her heart was beating faster than it should. She tried to find the catch, the hidden angle, the thing he was trying to get from her. But all she found was the simple truth of the sentence. That's not a small thing, she wrote at last. No. It's not. Another pause. But I think you're worth learning for. She stared at the screen. She could feel the weight of the moment, the shape of it, the way it was changing something between them. She should have pulled back. Should have made a joke, deflected, re-established the distance. Instead, she typed, I have a question for you. What? What do you actually see? When you look at me, what do you see? The pause stretched. She counted the seconds, 7, 12, 20, and felt the familiar prickle of anxiety. She'd pushed too far. Asked too much. Revealed too much of the uncertainty she usually kept hidden. Then, I see someone who walks into a room and makes everyone around her feel like they're the only person in it. I see someone who could be anywhere, with anyone, but she's here, talking to me at 3 in the morning. I see someone who's been hurt by the world and decided to keep showing up anyway. That's a lot for someone you barely know. I know. A beat. But I also know you wouldn't be asking unless you wanted to hear it. She closed her eyes. I'm not good at this, she wrote. At what? Letting people see me. I know. A long pause. Neither was I. But I'm learning. The invitation came 3 weeks to the day after they'd met. It arrived in an envelope so heavy it felt like a small animal, cream-colored, engraved, the kind of luxury that had stopped impressing Lumi a long time ago. The Vance Foundation for the Arts requests the pleasure of your company at the annual Contemporary Artists Benefit Gala. Saturday, November 14th, 8 p.m. The St. Regis Hotel. Attached was a personal note, written in the same hand but looser, more urgent. I know you said you don't give out your number. I also know you have a weakness for art that isn't pretending to be something else. Come. See what I've done with the money I didn't lose. I also owe you a drink. Or 7. Your call. Leo Lumi held the invitation in her hands and felt the weight of what it represented. A choice. A door opening. She could ignore it. She could let the weeks of midnight conversations fade into memory, a strange interlude in an otherwise ordinary life. She could go back to being the woman who saw everything and asked for nothing. But she thought about the message, "I think you're worth learning for," and something in her chest cracked open. Part 2. The dress arrived the next day. Simple black silk, cut on the bias, falling to her ankles like water. No tags. No price. No return address. Only a note, in Leo's handwriting: "No one should be invisible at a party. Especially not the one who taught me how to see." Lumi stood in front of the mirror, the silk pulling at her feet, and made a decision. The St. Regis ballroom was a sea of black and white, tuxedos and gowns, polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Art hung on temporary screens, waiting for the silent auction that would fund the Foundation's Artist-in-Residence program. 300 people drifted through the space, their conversations a low hum of ambition and approval. Lumi didn't try to be invisible. She walked through the crowd with the same quiet presence she brought everywhere, observing, assessing, letting the chaos flow around her. But tonight, she was also looking. She found him across the room. He was wearing a tuxedo, but he'd loosened his tie slightly, and his hair was a little less perfect than it had been at the penthouse. He was talking to a group of donors, nodding at something one of them said, but his eyes kept moving, scanning the crowd. When they found her, the scanning stopped. He crossed the room in a few long strides, ignoring the donors who tried to catch his attention. He was slightly breathless when he reached her, like he'd been holding something in and was finally letting it go. "You came. I was afraid I would." Lumi smiled. "You look good, Leo. Less tortured than the last time I saw you." "Less tortured," he repeated, and something in his face softened. "I'll take that as a compliment. The last time you saw me, I was in full crisis mode. And now? Now I'm in full trying to impress you mode. It's not much better." Lumi laughed, the sound surprising her. "Is that what this is? The dress, the invitation, she gestured at the glittering room, all of it? I'm not going to pretend I'm not trying to impress you." He met her eyes. "But I'm also not pretending I'm someone I'm not. That's the difference." Before she could answer, a man approached, older, silver-haired, wearing the kind of suit that cost more than most people made in a year. His eyes landed on Lumi with professional interest. "You're the one from Sotheby's," he said. "I remember you. You left, didn't you? Went to work for some small gallery in Chelsea. What a waste of talent." Lumi felt her professional smile click into place. "I wouldn't call it a waste. I'm still working with artists. Just different ones. Emerging talent," the man said dismissively. "No one remembers emerging talent. You should think about coming back to the market. People like us," he gestured between himself and Leo, "need people like you to validate our taste." The subtext was clear: you were someone once. You could be someone again. All you have to do is perform the same service for the right people. Lumi was about to make a polite, deflecting answer when Leo stepped in. "She's not validating anyone's taste," he said, his voice even but firm. "She's teaching people like me to see. There's a difference." The older man blinked. Leo didn't wait for a response. He placed his hand on Lumi's back, a light touch, just enough to convey solidarity, and guided her toward the bar. He said your hair would look good in this light, Leo said, his voice dropping to a murmur. He said it twice. First as a compliment. Second as a test, he wanted to see if you'd react to being watched. Lumi looked at him. You heard that? I've been learning a little of your observational style. Leo shrugged. You mentioned the expense reports. The patterns. I thought I should practice. So I've been watching people, Lumi finished. Carefully. Like I do. Like you do. He held her gaze. I'm not as good at it as you. But I'm trying. Something in Lumi's chest shifted. Not the guarded, careful part of her, but something deeper. Something that had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Not bad, she said softly. For a beginner. The dinner dragged on. Speeches, acknowledgments, the kind of prolonged self-congratulation that characterized events like these. Lumi sat at the main table, Leo beside her, and tried to concentrate on the proceedings. But it was hard. Hard with his attention fixed on her, hard with the knowledge that he'd been practicing her craft for weeks just to show he understood. Then the moment came. Leo rose from his seat and walked to the podium. The room quieted, polite applause fading as he adjusted the microphone. I want to thank you all for being here, he began. For supporting the Foundation's work. For believing in the power of art to change things. He paused, and his eyes found Lumi's across the room. The connection was electric, a line pulled tight between them. You might not know this, but I've spent the last decade of my life building things that weren't quite real. Projects that looked good on paper but couldn't survive close examination. I was so focused on the facade that I forgot to check what was underneath. A ripple of confusion passed through the audience. This wasn't the speech they'd been expecting. A few months ago, I was faced with a choice. I could keep pretending. Keep building castles on foundations of sand. Or I could tear it all down and start again. Leo's voice was steady. I chose to start again. He looked at the room. The Vance Foundation is changing its mission. We'll no longer be supporting established artists. Instead, we'll focus on emerging talent, artists who've been overlooked, undervalued, or simply not seen. The room was silent. Lumi felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She'd seen the documents, knew what this shift would cost him. The reputation, the connections, the years of careful relationship building. He was burning it all down. For the first time in my life, Leo continued, I want to be known for what's real. I want to be seen, not for what I've built, but for who I am. And that's because someone showed me that reality is worth more than any carefully constructed lie. His gaze locked onto hers. She felt it like a physical weight. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that gift. The applause was thunderous. Lumi barely heard it. She was watching Leo step away from the podium, his face flushed, his eyes searching the crowd for her. And she knew, with a certainty that echoed in every part of her, that this was real. The donors swarmed him. He handled them with grace, deflecting questions about the shift in focus, answering honestly even when the truth was uncomfortable. Lumi stayed at the edge of the crowd, giving him space. But she also stayed. She didn't walk away. Hours later, the last guest had departed. The staff was clearing tables, folding chairs, dismantling the temporary exhibits. Lumi stood by the window overlooking Fifth Avenue, watching the city glitter below. Lumi. She turned. Leo was close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. The mask was gone. In its place was something open. Nervous. Hopeful. That was some speech, she said. You've definitely burned some bridges. I've rebuilt others. He stepped closer. Better ones. Ones that can bear the weight of the truth. Is that what you want? To be known for telling the truth? He stopped, searching for the words. I want to be known for something real. I want to be seen for who I actually am, not who I've been pretending to be. And who is that? Leo looked at her. Not with the assessing gaze of the man she'd met in the penthouse, but with something gentler. Something that had been growing in the midnight hours between them. A man who spent a long time being terrified of being seen, he said. And now I'm not. Lumi felt something shift in her chest. The wall she'd built around herself, the careful distance she maintained, was starting to crack. Show me, she heard herself say. He took her hand. The car took them through the village, past the narrow streets and brownstones that had somehow survived Manhattan's relentless transformation. Leo didn't explain. He just held her hand in the darkness, his thumb tracing slow circles on her palm. The gallery was small. Tucked between a vintage clothing store and a coffee shop that had probably been there since the 80s. Its windows were dark, but the sign was still visible in the streetlight. Leo produced a key and unlocked the door. Close your eyes, he said. I don't, just for a second. Trust me. She closed her eyes. She heard the click of a switch. Felt the change in the light behind her eyelids. Then, open. Lumi opened her eyes. The space was beautiful. White walls, polished concrete floors, track lighting that highlighted every surface. No art yet, just empty walls waiting to be filled. But it wasn't the emptiness that made her breath catch. It was the possibility. I bought it, Leo said. I wanted a space that wasn't about commerce. A place where artists could show what they made without worrying about whether it would sell. He was still holding her hand. His palm was warm, slightly damp with nerves. It's yours, he said. You told me you left Sotheby's because you got tired of serving value instead of art. This is your chance to change that. To show the world the artists who deserve to be seen. Lumi stepped forward. She walked into the space, her footsteps echoing on the concrete. 3 steps. Stop. She looked at the track lighting, the exposed brick, the window that faced the street. Another few steps. She touched the wall with her fingertips, cool and smooth, waiting. She turned back to him. You bought me a gallery. I bought a space. The gallery part is up to you. His voice was softer now. But I thought, he shook his head. I thought you should have somewhere to put all that seeing you do. Somewhere it could do some good. Lumi looked at the empty walls again. The feeling in her chest was impossible to name. It was too large, too bright, too much like hope. She stopped. The words wouldn't come. She shook her head, a breath of laughter escaping her. I don't have words. That's a first. Don't get used to it. He smiled. I'll put it on my list of achievements. She stood in the center of the gallery, looking at him. The night's events were settling around them like dust after a storm. The speech. The donors. The car ride through the sleeping city. You're not allowed to make me speechless, she said. I'll try to remember that. You won't. No, he agreed. Probably not. She walked toward him slowly. When she was close enough to feel the warmth of his body, she reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the slight stubble that had grown over the course of the evening. I see you, she said softly. I've always seen you. That's never been the question. Leo's eyes widened. Then what's the question? She paused. The question was the same one she'd been asking herself since the first night. The same one she'd been deflecting in every midnight message. Whether you're ready for someone who won't look away. Leo's breath caught. Lumi saw it, the flicker of fear, quickly suppressed. The memory of a lifetime spent hiding. The hope that had been growing in the cracks of his carefully constructed world. Lumi, he said. I've been ready since the moment you told me my painting was a forgery. I just didn't know it until now. She smiled. Then she kissed him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question neither of them quite knew how to answer. But then Leo's arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and the question became something else. A statement. A promise. A beginning. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Leo's face was flushed, his eyes bright. That was, I know. She touched his cheek. That's what I thought too. The dawn came slowly, painting the sky over Williamsburg in shades of pink and gold. They'd walked from the gallery to the waterfront, their hands entwined, the city waking around them. Leo stopped at the edge of the park, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The towers that had been the backdrop to his empire, his lies, his carefully constructed life. I almost lost all of this, he said quietly. Not the money. He gestured vaguely, the chance to be real. Lumi stood beside him. You didn't lose it. You chose it. Because you showed me I could. Don't give me all the credit. She turned to face him. You're the one who decided to look. I just handed you a mirror. Leo laughed, but there was a catch in his voice. Is that what you do? Hand people mirrors? I show them what's there. The rest is their choice. And what's there in this mirror? Lumi considered the question. She looked at him, at the man who'd been so good at lying and who'd chosen to stop. At the man who'd bought her a gallery because she'd told him once, in passing, about her dream. You, she said. Just you. No more pretending. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. Do you think it'll work? Us? Lumi met his gaze. She saw the hope there, the fear, the desperate need to believe that something good could last. We'll see, she said. Then she reached out and took his hand. Not letting him take hers. She placed it in her own, her fingers weaving between his. I'm not walking away, she said. He looked at their joined hands, then at her face. His smile was uncertain, but growing. It's not a promise, she said. It's just where I am right now. And where's that? She looked at the skyline, the city spread before them like a promise waiting to be kept. Here, she said. With you. For as long as this lasts. Leo's hand tightened on hers. And what if it lasts a long time? Lumi smiled. She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the sunrise, on the endless possibility of the morning. Then I guess we'll find out. They stood together as the light spread across the water. The city hummed behind them, a million lives beginning their day, blind to the small revolution that had happened in the night. Lumi thought about the first moment she'd seen him, the mask, the performance, the fear that had been so carefully hidden. She thought about the midnight messages, the slow unspooling of his story, the way he'd let himself be seen. She thought about the gallery. The empty walls. The possibility. You know, she said, you're going to have to let me run that gallery however I want. I know. No interference. No financial strings. No showing up to tell me what to do. I know. And if I decide to show a painter who does nothing but shadows, you have to let me. Leo laughed. That's exactly the kind of artist this foundation should be supporting. Lumi finally turned to look at him. His face was open, genuine, nothing like the guarded man she'd met on that first night. I think you might actually mean that. I think I might actually mean everything I've said to you, he replied. She studied him for a long moment. The sun caught the edges of his face, softening the sharp lines, making him look younger. Unburdened. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay. Let's see where this goes. Leo pulled her closer. She let him. The warmth of his body against hers was solid, real, nothing like the carefully constructed illusions she'd spent her life learning to see through. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For showing up. He pressed his lips to her forehead. For staying. Lumi closed her eyes and let herself feel the moment. The uncertainty, the hope, the terrifying possibility of something new. Don't thank me yet, she said. The night's not over. Leo laughed again, his chest rumbling against hers. It's almost morning. Exactly. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. That means we have time. His smile was radiant, full of the same openness that had been growing between them through every stolen hour of conversation. He had been so lost, so adept at hiding himself away. Now he was simply here, with her, not performing, not protecting, just trusting. We have time, he echoed. Lumi turned back to the river. The sun was climbing higher now, the sky blue and clear. Manhattan's skyline glittered in the distance, a city of impossibilities and fresh starts. You know what I think? She said. Tell me. I think you're going to be fine. Not because you have money or power or all of this, she gestured at the city, but because you finally stopped lying to yourself. Leo was silent for a moment. Then, I think that's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me. It's not kindness. It's just truth. That's what makes it kind. Lumi looked at him. She saw the man he'd been, the man he was becoming, the man he might be if he kept making the same choice, over and over, to be real. Come on, she said, tugging his hand. I know a place that does breakfast. And I don't mean the kind that costs $200. Where? Lumi smiled her real smile, the one she kept hidden from everyone but the night. Follow me, she said. And try to keep up. They walked through the waking city, past coffee shops and bodegas, past the early risers already claiming their corner of the day. Leo's hand was warm in hers, his pace matching hers without effort. Somewhere behind them, the gallery waited. Empty walls. Possibilities. And ahead of them, the morning. Unwritten. Unfolding. Lumi didn't look back. She never did.